So Christine, what are we seeing happening with giving trends in the church? Are we seeing trends vary by region in the U.S., and if so, why?
I think that a lot of the way that we approach giving trends, it does depend sometimes on the different levels that you're talking about within the church. At the general church, we've obviously heard reports that have come from the General Council on Finance Administration that giving is down to the general church overall this year in 2019 compared to previous years, and some of that also depends on which fund you're talking about. So we are seeing some reduction in that, kind of maybe across the board for the general church level. At the annual conference level, I can say that for North Carolina, we're actually at this point in the year just a bit ahead of where we were in previous years. So we don't necessarily see that reduction there in North Carolina, and some of my colleagues in other annual conferences are reporting a similar thing, that they're staying about where they were compared to last year in those giving levels. We've talked a bit about giving in a local church as well, and following some of the trends that we've seen over the last few years about giving in a local church. We do see some reduction in maybe giving percentage rates with some of those, as we've had changes in worship service attendance and all of those things at the local church. But what we're seeing kind of across the board, dollar-wise, they're staying pretty consistent. So when we look at the base of those who are giving, and they're giving around the same dollars, but the base has gone down, then that means giving for that base then is kind of up. We're looking at how we face prioritization of giving in the local church when there's so many other competing areas that are coming towards. So we're seeing some change the general church level, but my experience in the annual conference, at least where I am, it's been pretty consistent.
And Christine, I would say my experience is consistent with that, and I think you're spot on. And some of the studies that are out there nationally suggest that fewer people are giving to churches, but the giving level seems to be relatively stable, which means fewer people are giving more money. And my concern with that is the aging of the giving, that we're having more and more older people. We're all getting older every year, but the giving age is going higher, and we're not doing a good enough job reaching younger people in terms of starting them giving and making that happen. So I think we have a long-term issue there, that older group that's continuing to give more and more cannot do that forever for obvious reasons, and so we've got to find ways to get younger folks more into the making those gifts to make up the difference.
My concern with that is what's going to happen to the future generation. We invest so much money in our children and grandchildren for their college education, for their possibilities of them better themselves in their lives, and how much we are investing for them to keep their faith, and how much are we putting in our churches in order to preserve the church and continue our tradition and continue the importance of being a Christian and being good disciples for this future generation in times where there is so much need, because people are struggling in life, and there are so many ways of us continuing the faith as we continue to give more for the goodness of the future generation.
Dennis, how have General Conference and its aftermath affected giving this year?
Well, I can speak specifically to the Mountain Sky Conference. I can talk to that, and I can say that our overall giving to the conference level is down about 10%. Okay. Since General Conference. Is that all attributable to General Conference 2019? Who knows? Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that at the conference level we have seen a decline of income. And some of it is you go back and talk to local pastors, local churches and their lay leadership as well as their pastors. There's a wide range of answers as to what's going on. You have some churches that are extremely unhappy. Well, you have a lot of churches that are unhappy with the way General Conference ended up, and the manner and the process of how that ended up. And so some very important people have walked away from the Methodist Church at the local church level, which clearly has an impact at that church. And it's no clear answer as to whether it's traditionalist or progressives. It's both. It's a both and. people that are dissatisfied with that. And we've got to figure out a way, of course, to stop the fighting and get back to the mission of the church and focus on that.
Does anybody have anything?
I think that's a good response. Dennis, one thing that's absolutely clear, though, Vicki, is that there's a great deal of uncertainty in our church today. And whether or not there are statistics or data to support what people may be doing to respond or not respond to that is not necessarily clear at this point. But we do know that people aren't really clear about where we're going. And I think as we go into the next general conference, that's going to be the priority, so that in essence people will be able to make some decisions. There's several other factors I think that may be affecting overall giving from annual conferences. I can surely tell you that in Texas, we're still responding to the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, and also now the new tropical storm Imelda. So in essence, there may be additional reasons that impact the giving on the local church level to the conference. So it's all not about the general conference, but there certainly is a great deal of uncertainty.
Okay.
And I would add, in addition to that, talking about the aftermath from General Conference, that we've certainly seen some churches that were pleased with General Conference, with the way things went. We have some of those that are continuing to respond to the Connectional Church in the way that they have done in the past. We have some churches that were not happy with the way General Conference worked and maybe withholding apportionments and not paying those their Connectional Giving this year because they were not happy with the way General Conference went. We had some churches that were happy with the way General Conference went, but not happy that it didn't go further, who are also withholding apportionments and kind of holding back a little bit. So we've got, if we were able to consider these in a spectrum, the way that we tend to do with a traditional side, a progressive side, and we tend to objectify those two sides, then if we were looking at that, then we have people at both ends of that spectrum that are doing a similar response. They're doing a similar thing based on the same exact event. So we have seen some of that, but I will offer, at least in North Carolina, that's not been the majority. So we spend a lot of time talking about responses to General Conference. So far, that's not played out to be our majority response in North Carolina. So we still have people who are within the connection, who are within the ministry of the United Methodist Church and pleased to do so and still committed to that ministry, that are still together in what we're doing in the Connectional Church.
And I would just add, in the Tennessee Conference, we're 10 to 15% down versus last year, and I don't know all the reasons for that. We like to blame it on General Conference. I don't really know if that's the truth. I know there's people unhappy on both sides, the uncertainty, Reggie, as you talked about. But I think one of the things we have responsibility as leaders is to say that the answer to that frustration, the answer to that uncertainty is not to withhold your apportionments. Because if that's the answer and we become crippled financially, we're not going to be able to get through these issues. And we have to help people understand that the vast majority of the money they give for apportionments is not going to these issues that they're unhappy about. It's going to help people in need and that have very real day-to-day needs throughout the whole world. And so stopping paying apportionments is not the solution to the frustrations and the disagreements that we're having. It weakens us and it weakens our ability to be in ministry and serve people in need. And I think the more we can educate people about what apportionments are actually used for, it would help. I know people are frustrated and they want to have a way to vent their frustration, and so they choose, well, I'm just not going to pay apportionments. Well, I think we have to help people understand that's not the answer.
I think it's important to keep that passion of trying to make sure that we understand what is our mission. Our mission to reach out to others and make disciples of Jesus Christ to transform the world. And in the midst of all the things that we are experiencing and lack of resources sometimes, we don't realize the impact that it has on people and churches and around the world that are making church out of nothing. So it's extremely important that we keep that passion, because we're a global church and we are making impact to a lot of people that are in need.